It wasn't long ago that a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease would be met with the question, what's that? But today, with approximately 1.5 million people in the United States being diagnosed with the disease, it's no longer such a mystery. While it most commonly affects people over the age of 60, it can occur in those as young as 20 years of age. Of course, with the advent of the internet, more evolved doctor-patient communication, and the increased amount of scientific information available, it's easier to find out what's being done for people with Parkinson's. But if you've just recently received the news that you have Parkinson's, there's the practical information which you, your doctors, nurses, medical practitioners, family and friends will no doubt sift through together. Now, even with all of that, there's still the lingering question, how do you live with Parkinson's? Well, perhaps there's no better source of information and inspiration than from someone already doing just that. And you're about to meet some extremely courageous people who want to share their experiences with you in their own words. The thoughts, opinions, and experiences you're about to hear will be a starting point, a beginning, so you, along with your loved ones, can navigate through the maze of experiences associated with a diagnosis of Parkinson's. It's the support of hearing from someone who's walked down this new path that we hope will help you in living with Parkinson's.
It was 1992. I was 4 years into retirement, and I noticed I had a tremor. My internist didn't suspect anything, but I had to go to a rheumatologist for a problem I had with my knee. He took one look at me and he says, "You got Parkinson's disease." He could tell by the mask on my face. He directed me back to my internist. I didn't believe this whole thing. I was disbelieving. He referred me to a neurologist who confirmed the diagnosis.
So I go in the doctor's office, and he doesn't think it's a big deal because my hands are shaking. It's no big deal. How does that affect your life? And I told him, when you're 36, you want to put on eye makeup, and your hand is shaking, you can't do it. Which, of course, was nothing to the doctor. But then when I walked out of the doctor's office into the waiting room, and I saw the people that were waiting there, wheelchairs and canes and heads bent over, I thought, oh my God, that's not going to happen to me. That was my first experience with it.
I was eating soup and I was dribbling it. It's very difficult. And she noticed my hand was tremoring. She's a speech pathologist also. And she suggested I see a neurologist, which I did do, and got a diagnosis right away. My dad had had it, and I didn't worry about it because they always said that it was not genetic. And so I accepted the fact that I have it. I saw him with it and saw that it wasn't fatal, and decided that I could live with it.
When I first figured I had something wrong with me, I would go into McDonald's and I would go to pay for my food, and I couldn't pull my billfold out of my back pocket. I had much trouble doing that, and when I blew dry my hair, I had trouble holding the blow dryer up.
When Jim first was showing signs of something was wrong, he would, on his own, perform that hand movement and tapping fingers, and he'd say, "Look at my left hand, how much difference there was." And sure enough, and he'd keep doing that, and people would make remarks that he looked like he had a stiff neck. He'd walk very, very stiff. He never had any tremors until more recently.
I was first diagnosed with Parkinson's back around 1996. I felt that I was getting a little tired, more tired than I should, and also I had a foot that dragged a little bit. So I went to see the internist doctor, who sent me to a neurologist, and after about a 5-minute conversation, she said, "You have Parkinson's." And I asked the doctor how they could possibly know after just 5 minutes of talking. And she said she was in that business, and she could tell the way I walked and my facial expression, the fact that my eyes didn't blink like the normal eyes would do it. And so, but I was surprised. And then I was a little bit frightened because I didn't know anything about Parkinson's, so I had to go home and look it up in a dictionary and the medical books and started to gather up some knowledge on it.
And I've had my tears at times. I remember one time, shortly after I was diagnosed, driving, all of a sudden the tears started coming. Soft tears at that. My life is never going to be the same. This is big time stuff.
I was just sitting at the table and noticing my fingers were tremoring, and I just sort of gave me a few thoughts about what that might be. I had a sister-in-law who had early onset Parkinson's from way back, so it made me think about that immediately.
First time I noticed something was wrong, I used to do high impact floor aerobics, and I would go to class, and about 10 minutes into the class, I couldn't get my left side to do what I wanted it to do. I also noticed in working on the computer, I couldn't type as well as I used to type. And that's when I decided to go to a doctor, a neurologist, and find out what was going on. And like I said, I went through many doctors and many tests, and it took about 2 years before I was diagnosed with Parkinson.
I used to walk the dog every day, and he always waited for me patiently while I got home. And while I was walking the dog, my arm felt stiff. My left arm felt very stiff. So I started to carry it in a very unusual way. So we had some heart problems in our family before then, and we were concerned that I might be developing a stroke or a blood clot or something. So I went into the doctor and had several different diagnoses until we finally arrived at the prognosis that I had Parkinson's. And when I heard that I was a Parkinson's patient, he could just as well have told me that I was pregnant. I was just as surprised. So from that point on, that was in 1992, we were treated for Parkinson's.
I had trouble getting my change into the wallet, getting the dollars into the wallet after having dinner out, and I'd stand there and try to get it in, and couldn't get it in for a while.
I even said to him one time, I said, you're talking slower and you're talking softer. He said, well, I'm getting older. And I just said, yeah, I am too. Why am I talking so loud and so much faster? So little tiny things like that, we knew there was something not quite right. But it took a while before they could find out what it was. But I would tell people to be persistent. When you see something is not quite right, as a wife or as a husband, you see things about your partner that they can't possibly see, but you see it, and just to be persistent. I was persistent. I knew there was something was not quite right.
As you just heard, each person had some type of symptom that caused them to search out their physician for a diagnosis. Now, the symptoms of Parkinson's include having a tremor while at rest, slowness of movement called bradykinesia, rigidity and stiffness of the muscles, and problems with balance. When a physician confirms two of those symptoms, a diagnosis of Parkinson's is the result. Now, for some, just knowing what's wrong is a relief, but for others, the diagnosis comes as a shock. Either way, the person with Parkinson's and their family go through different stages as they grapple with this chronic condition. Now, it's very important to know that this condition affects everyone differently. Symptoms vary, the progression varies, and no two people respond to treatment the same way.
Sure, I worry about him now. I watch him. I see the changes. But we try to live as normally as we can.
I'm always doing something. I really haven't got time to think about this thing. So I guess I'm dodging it, but that's the way I cope with it.
And you have to do the things that you like to do. And that's what young Parkinsonians do. They think they have to quit doing things. They don't, like if they're heavy golf players, they don't think they can play golf anymore. The only thing that you really shouldn't play are games where you have to run backwards because you'll be on the floor for sure.
I'm not as strong as I was. My golf swing is a little bit aborted, but my tennis game hasn't suffered too much. Tremors get in the way when you're nervous. You tend to tremor more.
You make everybody very miserable when you've got Parkinson's disease because it's always, why me? You know, why did this happen to me? So what happens is you begin to use it in your favor. When you want to do something, you say, oh, sure, you know, you don't have Parkinson's disease, that kind of remark. And it was terrible, and one day you just have to take hold of yourself and not allow that to happen. So I just was making everybody miserable, including myself. And so I thought, that's it, I'm not going to do that anymore. So that's what I did, and I just really worked on controlling my anger and feelings that I had. And the way I did that was through the yoga. All of a sudden, I realized I could make my hands stop. And I thought, wow. You know, if you can do that, you can do everything. So that's what I did. I started one thing at a time. And then you complete the one thing. That's what Parkinsonians are very impatient. And they want it to happen in a week. They want to take a magic pill, and it doesn't work like that. So you have to really get a hold of yourself.
He did all the driving before he had Parkinson's. So I didn't have to drive. I mean, I was really treated wonderfully, and I still am. It's just that I have to do a lot of things now that I didn't have to do. But I'm just hoping that I can learn to be as gracious as he has been. It's a lot of work. I said, you know, you did a lot of work. But I drive most of the time now since he's had Parkinson's. It's all right.
Well, the feeling about having tremors is, early on it was more embarrassment. Like, what's wrong? Is Flynn on drugs of some kind of hyped up type thing or something? And it was kind of embarrassment until I found it didn't really matter to a lot of people. And sometimes I'll tell people, I'll make jokes about it.
I'm very afraid of falling. I have fallen 6 times recently. Fortunately, I have not been hurt. I've been shaken up, of course, but I haven't been hurt where I've broken bones that could really make a difference in my life. But I've tried very hard to keep, I hate to use the word normal life, as possible. I rarely say no to anything anybody asks me to do. I try to keep contact with people as far as that goes, but I still, Parkinson's is always there. You can't really, it really identifies you. It can't help but.
I want people to be aware. I preach awareness. I'm not in a position to find a cure, but I can go out and toot my horn and make people aware of what happens and what can happen to you down the road if you get Parkinson's disease. And I don't want to scare people, but I like to let them know that I'll wear my Parkinson name on my T-shirt, so if they got a question to ask me, come ahead and let's talk about it. I'm glad to talk with anybody about Parkinson's.
I just kind of resign myself to the fact that this is what I have, and I'm going to work to fight it. I don't give up. Like I said, I push myself to the limit, do whatever I have to do. I'm not a person that likes to depend on people. I like to be very independent, and that's the difficult part there. My husband wants to be very helpful, and I won't let him because I'm stubborn that way.
I try to set goals for myself and always plan something to do, so I have something to look forward to, something to work on. I try not to get up in the morning with just nothing to do for the day. I always, and of course I always get a lot of honeydew jobs that I stack up there and don't get on right away. So there's always, if nothing else, then I'll do some work around the house. But I'm still enjoying myself a whole lot, so I'm not going to slow down yet.
Parkinson's cannot be cured, but it can be controlled for many years with a combination of treatments including medication, exercise, rehabilitation therapies, and in some cases, surgery may be indicated. A close working relationship with your neurologist is very, very important. This regimen requires attention that is finely tuned to your particular needs.
I've had medications that I was on for 6 months and all of a sudden developed a reaction to it and had to be taken off. So it's basically touch and go. I mean, everybody's different, everybody takes different medications, different doses, and there's really no set diagnosis for medication.
It was very, very difficult for me to stand up in front of a group and say, like, I'm teaching this yoga class here, which I also do. I'm teaching this class, but if you see my hands shake, it has nothing to do with the yoga. In fact, the yoga helps it, and sometimes it increases the tremors because you get all this energy flowing into your body. And the first time I said that on stage or in front of a group, it was like a weight off my shoulders.
With Parkinson, your muscles and your joints, you get very stiff, and doing water aerobics is good because I don't have to worry about falling down or hurting myself. But it's important to keep healthy, just to exercise and that sort of thing.
The doctor first asked me if I had good insurance. And I said, why are you asking me that question? He said, well, you're going to be taking some medications the rest of your life.
Before he had this pump put on, which is continuous medication. It's on a continuous basis, liquid form. It goes directly into his intestines instead of taking it by mouth. Prior to that, he did not have good minutes on some days. I mean, it would be, we could not plan anything. We could not plan a trip for the family. We couldn't plan on a football game. We couldn't plan on anything because there would be days on end he would never have a good on time. And it was very frustrating for us, and that went on for several years until he finally went on this pump.
The solution eventually was brain surgery, which is called DBS, deep brain stimulation. And that reduced the medication I was taking from over 25 pills a day to less than 15 pills a day.
The stimulation he has really acts as electrical medication. It's taking the place of a lot of the medication in a pill form or chemical form that he was taking before. So it's not a cure, and we tell people that, and everyone reacts differently, even to the surgery too.
First of all, is to read, get informed. I think that's supportive because then you realize you're not alone. The other thing is to make them aware there are support groups for them. By reading and learning, you realize there are things you can do to help yourself. For example, voice, which I'm having a little trouble with now. There is a treatment that you can do, exercises. This is the time of day I usually do my exercises that I try to do every day as an example. But there are things you can do. You can still adapt your life to certain activities, whether it's yoga as one example, Tai Chi, water therapy.
You have to break everything down to single units. Like, if you're going to lift your arm up, you have to figure out what muscles you're going to use for that before you do it.
2 neurologists I've had, and to talk honestly with them about what they think and trying to come to a shared decision about what changes or what choices to make.
The value of family support and other outside services available cannot be overstated. The ever-changing nature of Parkinson's requires that people reach out to one another and find out what services are available to help them navigate through the disease both physically and emotionally.
We went straight to my parents' house. That was 3 days after his diagnosis, and sat and talked to him. And I sort of explained what was going on. Since then, my parents have been there for us all the way.
Sometimes, my family's pretty good about not, don't do this, John, don't do that, John. But sometimes they'll say, oh, let us do that. And it's hard for them too, I think, sometimes to not let me go ahead and do things because they think it's going to be too heavy or too tiring or what. And I appreciate that. It doesn't hurt my feelings.
Like in my situation, my husband thinks there's ways that I can build up my muscles or whatever and change what's happening to me, and he doesn't quite understand that I can't help it. And so it's important that the family educate themselves and understand what the disease does, what a person can and cannot overcome, and what they have to accept.
One of their great concerns was driving with grandchildren in a car. And so we've made it a family rule that I don't drive with them. Whenever we take them anywhere, Nancy
I do the driving.
does the
just to
driving.
make them feel more comfortable.
The support that I get is a good support. My wife gives me a lot of support.
But I sought out a support group immediately, and it's probably the best thing I did. I think anyone with any chronic illness should be in a support group because you get to see people in all stages of development, get to exchange ideas, and I found out since that the medicine, the disease works differently in different people.
I just figured that, you know, when two people have been together for 52 years and love each other and care about what happens to one another, we're just going to live out our lives that the way we have been. And we'll do the best taking care of each other that we can. And if the day comes that we can't take care of each other, we'll have to make other arrangements for ourselves.
When you have Parkinson's, it's even more important that you do have communication with other people. It's like you have to incorporate yourself, otherwise you're going to set yourself apart. And that's what Michigan Parkinson's Foundation support groups do. They help each other. They're wonderful.
We have a positive attitude in our group. And I use myself as an example of what you can do if you don't let it get the best of you. Keep active, eat, take your medicine.
Faith always helps. And
Right on that.
obviously it helps me that you know that the churches and the people in the church are supportive of what we're trying to do. And faith, without that, I guess I'd be in deep trouble. God doesn't promise to cure everything, but He promises to always be there with you, and so, you know, that's very helpful.
Actually, I got involved in advocacy to find a cure for Parkinson's. And I think instead of feeling powerless, it empowered me. It really was, in a way, it was a salvation for me. I met a lot of wonderful people. I'm still doing it, not to the extent I was. But I thought, if there can be a cure for this disease and all the people it's affected, it would be absolutely wonderful. Our country does so many marvelous things. This should be possible too.
I think that the future really looks good for me in the long run also. I don't plan on dying from Parkinson's. I plan on dying from something else. Maybe falling overboard or something.
Everyone knows someone with Parkinson's. And while the experience of the condition affects people differently, one thing remains constant. Education and support for those with Parkinson's, their families, and health professionals continues to be a very important factor in coping with the disease. Now, we'd like to thank all of the people who agreed to openly share their experiences and their feelings in the hope that it will help those affected by Parkinson's. And if you'd like more information, you can contact the Michigan Parkinson Foundation at this number, 1-800-852-9781.